full of outstanding and world-class vision and world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
And good evening and welcome to Education Tonight, live on YouTube. And you can catch you up. Maybe you listen to this in the future. I don't know. But welcome anyway. Good evening, Brent. How are you? You having a good week?
Nearly there, yeah. Having a good week. Oh, actually, I'm not telling a lie. It's been a tough week. You know, the weather changed. It got rainy. So our facilities were, let's just say, we had more leaks than the Titanic. There were buckets in the exam hall. Sixth wealthiest country in the world, and we've got buckets where the children are doing their terminal exams. You know, that's after the power cut the previous week. Just feels like everything is just in sort of decline, doesn't it? Bless.
Or as we saw the other day, one of the wealthiest countries in the world and can't afford an umbrella.
Well, yes, and but then, you know, things can only get better. You know,
I just wonder if there's a lesson there that everyone's used the next day as like a starter. I was thinking for business studies. You know, PR, public relations,
waterproof suit,
but geography. There must be a geography lesson in climate there.
Well, you think of the amount of lecturns there's been through the last couple of years. They could have had one with maybe some sort of waterproof device on it, or you know, you think there's countries that innovated and invented so much that somebody can come up with a better way of predicting the weather. But yeah, it's interesting. Some of the media has portrayed it. I think that my favorite was the Cold War Steve one, where there was a lot of sewage. But we are where we are with it, and of course, my daughters get the day of school on July the 4th because their primary school is used again, as always, as a polling station. So it's good to see democracy in action, and a short campaign of 6 weeks, of course. And we'll see how higher education features in the manifesto.
That's one of the topics we want to cover tonight. We're going to do a kind of quick whistle-stop tour of kind of what the main parties are saying on this, because it does feel when you get to election that education is elevated right up in the kind of the public kind of consciousness. The NHS, education, the economy, these things are always kind of very high on people's agendas when it gets to this point. So I'm sure we'll hear more kind of as we go, but our main story tonight is we want to cover, and this is kind of an interesting thing, of these things that have come out, over the last couple of weeks. Where will they sit now? But the new RSHE guidance came out on the 16th of May. And that's our main topic tonight that we want to cover. So we've got two guests kind of coming on tonight to debate and talk that through with us. So it's one of these things that I think kind of almost like seemingly a lot of kind of government policy over the last year or so, particularly if we look at like RAC and other things, seemingly kind of overnight, a Monday morning, you wake up and everyone's on the news kind of talking about something that maybe wasn't fully on people's kind of radar or thinking. Maybe head teachers are getting ready for exams, teachers are getting ready to exams, DofE, guidance on sex and gender.
Well, it had been, I mean, it's much like many other things. This is being demanded for a period of time. Same as the mobile phone situation, which was probably 11 years too late, considering the first smartphone was invented in 2008, and we finally got guidance on that this year. So, I mean, it's always a lag time in education between when I'm waiting for some updates on things like vaping or AI. We're always just playing catch up. So, be honest, I think there is definite guidance was needed as the society develops, and schools are, if anything, at the sort of focal point of society. I mean, you've got 9 million children. That's 18 million sort of parents or guardians involved in schooling. It's 27 million people in and around a school community. That's just under half of the country. When you add the statistics, schools have a massive impact on society. And we saw, during COVID, how important schools were. But I suppose if we drawn up a list of things that are important to school at the moment, where would this actual guidance be in comparison to behavior, recruitment, retention? And it's interesting you're saying about, obviously the those involved in education are already starting the campaigning. I can see school cuts, the unions, and they're talking about the fiduciary pay cut, recruitment, retention. Where does this sort of advice come in the sort of middle of all the rest of things going on in education? To some people, this is extremely important. You know, it's part of what others would call the culture wars that's been developed. And I think some of this is bleeding over from the United States of America. I think some of this is happening in society. And like I was having a conversation with children today, and we were actually about Puritans and about, you know, opinions of people in the past, of trying to explain, you know, who a Puritan was. And we were discussing that people still have Puritan views of they're either one way an opinion or another way an opinion, and was trying to explain to them, obviously, Elizabeth's Tudor policies, where we should have Catholics and Puritans on either side, trying to explain this called the middle way, which is where Elizabeth tried to get tolerance between both Catholics and Protestants, but there was a force of Catholics pushing her one way, and a force of, you know, Puritans pulling her in the other way. And it just sort of, with them, it was weird. I was going, that's a little bit like we're at with some of these issues in society, and this is one of those issues. And I suppose what we'll try to do tonight is be as honest, fair, as balanced as possible with something that is and does cause and can cause some sort of stress with people, because it does the word I'd use, it can polarize opinions.
So we want to kind of set where the argument is, you know, as and where we are. But I do have some really, really good news, Brent.
Tell me the good news. Oh, we've got John back.
Say hello to John.
Hello, John. John's back. John Cat.
Back to John Cat. So we're really pleased to say that, as always, with all our sponsors, but this show is brought to you in partnership with John Cat Educational, publishers of professional development books and resources that support general teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncatbookshop.com to explore a full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off. Happy reading. So certainly over half term, and to carry on the reading phenomenon, I think Tom HB did a show on Monday with about reading, but Reading Solutions UK. Are you looking for the best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers? Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th, 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education expert Basit Sadiki, beloved children's author Michael Rosen, and national literacy Irene Picton. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of the current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for new educators and key stages. Visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutions.uk.co.uk to grab a free ticket. So you can see the QR code there to scan in. So let's kind of just set the scene a little. Let's just hear from Gillian Keegan on Good Morning TV, just so we can just kind of see kind of what was said from kind of the Department of Education and from the Education Secretary, just to kind of set in context where we are with this debate.
What problem we're trying to solve here is we released the Relationship, Sex and Health Education Guidance in 2019. It was made statutory in 2020. We did a review, or Ofsted did a review of that, and to see how it was embedded and how it was working in 2021. And as a result of that, a number of teachers and head teachers said it would be helpful to have more clarity of what's appropriate at what age, particularly between primary, secondary, early secondary, and then later in secondary. So we appointed an independent expert panel. Obviously, I didn't do this myself, with a group, a mix, different backgrounds in this space, and they have gone through and said, this is how you basically make sure it's age appropriate. But the other important thing this guidance is doing is we didn't have it clear enough that parents needed to have access and should have access to what their children are being taught in school. And there were some cases about schools not being sure because of copyright laws and some of the materials not getting shared, etc. And we heard some reports of that as well. So we just wanted to make it clearer for parents as well that they have the right to see the materials. They're the first educators of their children in this subject. They often are the first people to talk about these subjects to their children. So we wanted to make sure that they also had access to to what their children were learning in school.
Okay, so that's what Gillian Keegan said, and on the DFA website, they've kind of updated their side to again talk about from a panel and panel's advice. We're introducing age limits to ensure children aren't being taught about sensitive and complex subjects before they are fully ready to understand them. So they've set new guidelines in terms of age. In primary school, we've set out that all subjects such as the risks of online gaming, social media and scams should not be taught before the age of 3. Puberty should not be taught before the age of 4, while sex education shouldn't be taught before 5, in line with what pupils learn about conception and birth are part of the national curriculum for science. In secondary school, issues regarding sexual harassment shouldn't be taught before year 7, direct references to suicide before year 8, and any explicit discussions of sexual activity before 9. And they've also said that, and this is some of the things that kind of hit the headlines, we are also making it clear that the concept of a gender identity, the sense a person may have of their own gender, whether male or female, or a number of other categories, is a highly contested and should not be taught. So obviously the things that hit the headlines straight away were they're banning kind of sex education until the age of 13. So I guess we can have a little bit of a debate about whether that is kind of factually accurate, what was actually reported based on that. But also there's this line about the gender identity being highly contested and therefore shouldn't be taught. So that's the kind of the framework that I want to put around tonight, just so we can get the facts kind of as we are. So who have we got kind of in the studio? Have we got just Laurie, or?
We just have Laurie at the moment, and we're hopefully going to have Vix Lothian at some stage, who is.
Should we bring Laurie on then? So
bring Laurie.
Vix is here, but we can start with Laurie. So good evening. Thank you very much for being on Teachers Talk Radio tonight. So we've set the scene there. Kind of what were your initial thoughts, Laurie, on this guidance?
I should say I'm a math teacher and I'm a Labour councillor and portfolio holder for children and learning. In case anyone does this, that's my kind of my background on this, where I'm coming to. Broadly, I think there's a lot of good stuff. I know some people, it's the election coming up, and obviously some people are saying, oh, this is a culture war thing and the Tories are doing this. I think this is not a left-right thing. I don't think it should be like a political issue. It's about what's best for children. It's about safeguarding. So hopefully we'll be able to move away from that. I do think there are issues with what's taught, and I think some schools previously just approach this, they don't always have the expertise, so they go to external providers and they think that they're getting something very neutral, and actually often it is something very biased. And I think that some schools really are on it, but I think it does rely on schools really knowing a lot about it. So, and it is a bit of a Wild West in terms of like providers, what you get. So I definitely think this is needed. I think it should have come sooner. I think the few issues, which I only played the clip of Gillian Keegan, that we kind of like where she's previously, I think this is trying to fix. It's obviously the age appropriateness of some of the content. It's the kind of like not being told like correct things often about like biology, and often kids are being taught contested ideas as if they are true. And then obviously, yeah, it is the issue with like copyrights. There's quite a lot of times where parents will ask schools what was taught, and they say they can't give it to them. So I think it is quite good that it is kind of picking up on those 4 issues which do exist currently. So yeah, broadly.
Have you been made aware? Have you seen any evidence of like inappropriate stuff being taught to children?
I will give you a personal example if that's all right. So I had like last year a year 8 tutor group, and it was external thing, and it was about consent. Now, a lot of the actual content of it was all right, but then which, I mean, kids do need to know about that. But then at the end, it had a couple of slides which featured quite a lot of sexual things. And one of them was this kind of thing drawn like this. And I was hoping, just don't ask me about this, don't ask what that is, don't ask what that is. And then this thing finished, and some of the kids were like, so what was that? What was that? And then I said, oh, I'm not quite sure. And one of those, that was a butt plug, wasn't it? And I just thought, I don't want to have to discuss, like, kind of, so it did feel like going into some quite like kink and things with the kids that are really too young to, too young to really understand that. I think there is, I was looking at resources like earlier, and I do think sometimes what's been taught, I know that some local authorities, like I think in Oxford, they did something that they then had to withdraw because it wasn't appropriate. I think Brighton have kind of done some stuff that's a bit inappropriate, like things like talking about there's one of them like all about me, and they were teaching kids about like kind of self-pleasure and like masturbation, like at ages like 6 to 10. So I do think it's something that does need a bit of clarity. I think some schools would just kind of know what's reasonable, and actually we're professionals, we kind of know what's appropriate when, but I don't think all schools do get that right. So I do think having that extra clarity about what's appropriate to teach at what age, I think is quite useful.
I mean, being a PHSE coordinator, former PHSE coordinator in a faith-based school, I can tell you this is not a minefield. But I can also tell you that, you know, you outside agencies, you vet the agencies, you look at the resources, you vet the resources, you plan your lessons, and any competent teacher would be planning those lessons, bearing in mind we are now accountable, and most schools now upload their resources onto websites. And I mean, for me, I think Gillian Keegan is very light on the evidence, a lot of hearsay, a lot of sort of secondhand knowledge, a lot of somebody said this to me, somebody said that to me. And the majority of people I've been engaging with across the networks that I'm involved in obviously education, haven't really said that this is a major issue. Yes, there has been some things slipped through the net, you know, so a couple of resources from organizations, but there isn't a massive problem with this, because the majority of professionals out there are engaging with their communities and talk to their parents and pupils, teachers. We sort of know what our children is appropriate, because many of us are parents ourselves and work within our communities and know within our own context of our communities. You know, I've had situations where I've talked to Catholic teachers and said to Catholic teachers, you know, here you go, we're teaching this. And they're like, well, we're a Catholic school. Yes, but we're also a school where our children are living in the world that they're living in. So we are having to have a balance between what our faith would say and equally what our children need to know. But I think, do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you think that, because some have suggested, you know, that Gillian Keegan is trying to manufacture something here, that there isn't really the evidence to support that there is a massive problem?
I don't want to overstate it and say it's like the most serious thing. I think there are other issues in schools as well. I think there are a lot of organisations that do provide some quite like biased resources, particularly around like sex and gender. We can get onto that. Now, obviously, we don't know what each individual teacher does. And I think sometimes what I find my school is not the resources, but it's sometimes you have the assemblies and it's a live assembly. And I found this before, that the actual PowerPoint was not so bad, but then what the speaker was saying in the live assembly went kind of well beyond that. And they were like talking about all these like identities, like sex assigned at birth and all this, and as if it was just 100% factual. So I think it's an unknown, because I think kind of like what actually happens in a classroom, because we can look at like the resources given. I'm sure a lot of schools do well. But I know that there was this one in was it where the girls recorded the lesson, I want to say in Hastings, like a year or so ago, and the teacher was delivering that and was like kind of, and the students were kind of like questioning what they were told. Okay, they shouldn't have been recording it, but then the teacher reacted like really inappropriately. I think it's a bit of a question mark. Is it probably the big thing in every school? No, but I think there are some schools that are using quite biased resources, and I think probably having statutory guidance that clears it up for the minority is quite good.
Cool.
We've got Vix to bring in, because I think it can be interesting to have everybody in the debate if they're kind of around. Good evening, Vix. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for joining us. So I don't know if you've been able to kind of hear where we've kind of started tonight, and please feel free to kind of come in at any point if you kind of are listening to what we've said and kind of want to add anything to what's been said already tonight.
Yeah, I mean, lots of things are occurring to me actually as I was listening. Hi, Laurie. As I was listening to what you were saying there, in terms of it's more like a philosophical discussion as well as it is a practical discussion. As a history teacher, I've also coordinated PSHE and I've also taught sex education. I've been a specialist of that in a inner city school in Leeds, and age appropriateness is important, and guidance I think is welcome, but the way in which this guidance is communicated as a chasing the headlines, this is what we're doing, we're protecting our children, when actually knowledge sometimes is what children need in order to be able to protect them, in order to be able to know that what's happening to them is inappropriate. I did note that some discussion about photographs. Looks like it's at age year 7. I mean, as a parent, I know that there's been all sorts of stuff that's gone on in primary schools via WhatsApp, and things have had to be chased up. You know, there are to say there is a limit, and you cannot deal with children at a younger age. If they're not going to find out that information in school, where are they going to? They're still going to find out information elsewhere, and it's not going to be accurate information. And if you as a teacher are saying, sorry, I can't talk to you about that because you're not in year 9 yet, you are opening up a serious situation of confusion with some of these young people. Again, looking at discussion of sex education at year 5, and it has to be based on science. I mean, sex is not just a physical.
Sorry, Vix, can I just stop you there? Can I just bring Laurie in with that point then? So if teachers aren't able to kind of teach certain, let children kind of ask these questions in the classroom, have this kind of open conversation, is there a danger that they might go onto the internet, for example, and then start finding out information for themselves, which might be more explicit or maybe even incorrect?
I think there's a difference between children knowing what to watch out for quite generally, and being told the specific things, in detail, in graphic detail. So obviously you want children to be aware of abuse and things like that, and inappropriate relationships, and that could be from a young age. But that could be kind of and that's in there. You could be healthy relationships and things, but that's very different to giving them quite explicit things, knowledge too soon. I don't think any teacher reasonably would ever say to a child, I mean, it's if a child's raising stuff outside and it's like a safeguarding thing, I don't think any teacher is ever going to say, oh no, sorry, I can't talk to you about that because you're not in year 9 yet. So I think that's slightly, I'm not going to say scaremongering. I don't take that from the guidance that would ever happen. Obviously it's kind of like template, but obviously teachers can have conversations. It just needs to be appropriate and not at that kind of graphic level too soon.
To be honest, I think in the world we live in now, I think we need some guidance. We absolutely do. But I also think that we're being dragged into, I think, a wider situation that society needs to resolve before schools. And I think the government needs, if it's still contested, then it shouldn't be contested. In other words, it needs to be resolved. And I think our politicians need to not use schools as part of the games that they're playing within society. And for me, this feels, unfortunately, they're too culture warsy. And the guidance, which some of it actually looks what I think is quite useful, is mixed in with stuff that's obviously designed there to cause discord. Now, I have children who may come to me who've got very strict backgrounds, and they may say to me, I'm thinking of changing my identity. Now, what am I to do? If I have a child who I would know comes from a very strict background, would turn around and say, well, my parents are going to reject me. My parents are going to send me back to the country where I come from. I break that guidance. I'm breaking my professional standards and I'm liable. I don't break that guidance. I have a moral quandary because my loyalty is to that child. And my loyalty is to the education and welfare of that child and the safeguarding of that child. And I think, unfortunately, the government, again, when it comes to it, are saying parents have rights. And maybe, do you think there's more they're putting the rights of parents, not saying the rights of children? Because some have suggested this is bringing back a bit of trauma of Section 28. to some people who see some of Section 28's fingerprints on this. How do you respond? How do you respond to those, Peter Tatchell, for instance, people like that? What are they? They're very much against this because they believe, in their opinion, that is very much regressive and almost a return to those dark days.
Yeah. Should we just go around? Let's go Vix first. Then let's go to Laurie. Everyone gets a chance to.
I think you're right in that, and unlike Section 28, we do need to be clear. This is not banning, all discussion about gender and sex, and in a legislative way. But I think the overall messaging that we are giving young people is that this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. And even if different schools are going to interpret the guidance in different ways and allow this level of flexibility, one of my, I teach mainly at sixth form at the moment. One of my young people today was talking about how when they hear these news articles, the announcement before Christmas about the involvement of parents when it comes to gender identity, they feel really alarmed and worried and concerned, and they feel targeted because of that sort of guidance, the way in which it's broadcast out rather than evidence-based, involving a discussion of parents and teachers first. It feels very top-down. I know there is a consultation period with this here, but they've had their headlines, the government, haven't they? They've done it. They've had their headlines. They've done the tours of the breakfast TV shows, and they can go, look, we've done that. Meanwhile, there are a lot of young people who feel very confused now. Is it okay to discuss this? Is it not? And that's very reminiscent of Section 28.
Okay, Laurie, do you want to come in on that point?
I disagree wholeheartedly. I'm a gay man. I grew up through Section 28. I think that's not a appropriate comparison. You can still teach kids. Well, start with the Equality Act. This is the point: is that and not go beyond that. So you can still teach kids about gender reassignment, as it's stated in the Equality Act. The idea that some people, when they're adults, can reassign their gender. Okay, and that's uncontroversial. That's kind of the law. What it does say is that you shouldn't go beyond that and teach very contested ideas as if they are factual. Such as the concept of gender identity. And my issue with this is I think gender identity is a deeply regressive idea. And often when it's taught on this, you've seen this diagram, and it's got the girl at one end, and the Barbie at one end, and the action man at the other. And it says, where on this is your gender identity? And that's such a regressive notion to teach to children, because then, like, if you're a girl who doesn't conform to stereotypes and has like short hair and is into football, the message that sends to you is, oh, you're not really a girl, you're really a boy trapped in the wrong body, or you're non-binary or something else. And that's awful. The message, the progressive position should be to say boys can do what they want. Like, if boys want to grow their hair long or wear wear makeup, they can do. If girls want to cut their hair short and play football or do whatever, they should be able to do that. They're no less a girl. If a boy wants to wear a dress, he's no less a boy. That's the progressive thing to tell children. So a lot of this kind of like stuff that they're taught around gender identity is basically just regressive stereotypes. And I think often we've seen like in the, I know it's slightly the other guidance about gender questioning children that you mentioned, but obviously we've seen like a 5,000% increase in children becoming dysphoric. And there is in some schools, I think, a real school to clinic pipeline of these kids who are kind of given this messaging. And often it's autistic kids who don't kind of fit in and do really struggle. And they're kind of being told, no, the reason you struggle is not because of your autism or because of this or this, it's because you have a different gender identity, and that's why you don't fit in. So I do really worry. I mean, some people do support the idea of gender identity, fine. And a lot of some gay people do, some trans people don't. And I've got one of my best friends is trans, transitioned 20 years ago, post-operative, but doesn't support the idea of gender identity. So I do think we should separate two different things. Being able to talk about gay, trans, lesbian, bisexual people, that's one thing, and that's a controversial, that's in the Equality Act, and teaching as if it were factual, a much more contested idea about gender identity. And it was kind of in the new guidance, but I think it's stated much more explicit here. So I don't know, that would be my response to that.
Okay, go on, Vix, you want to come in?
Yeah, it's the root cause of all of this, really, that teaching sex and relationships education is actually a specialism. and we're not classing it as such. You know, that people should be trained and knowing how to, as you were saying, Brent, distinguish between quality materials and not quality materials, and being able to distinguish if there's any subjectivity on there, and actually being able to handle, exactly like you were saying there, Laurie, all of those really important discussions. And we can't just assume that every form tutor or every primary school year teacher knows how to do that. And perhaps in a world where kids are finding out way more information at a much earlier age, that actually we should be properly training, properly supporting, and showing the career development for people, for adults, for teachers who want to teach that and are actually, good at it, because not every teacher is, and not every teacher wants to do it. And if we actually invested in SRE education and particular teachers and their training, perhaps we wouldn't need all this level of guidance as we're receiving.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it just, unfortunately, just falls down your kind of hierarchy as a teacher. You know it's important, you know it's there, but you've just bounced off kind of 5 lessons. You've got all your marks to do. Then all of a sudden you look down the calendar of the week. Oh, sex education. Yeah. And all of a sudden you're scrambling around for the PowerPoint. And, likewise, then you can make a complete horlicks of it, completely unintentionally, because, you've not had the opportunity to fully get to grips with the material.
And there is that, Adam. Yeah, you go into the staff room. Yeah, you go to the staff room and you hand the sex education lesson to the teacher, and it's like basically handing the hand grenade before it goes off. And you're exactly right, Rick, on that, because I've done it where I've said to people, here's the lesson. I've taught, here I planned the lesson, and there are tutors who will embrace that and say, absolutely fine, I can do that. Confidence levels. There are some people who are confident teaching this material. I literally, Laurie, I literally taught that lesson today, funny enough, about sexism and gender, and put up like all the words that were feminine and masculine, loyal, strong was a male thing, blue. So I did that lesson today, but I could do that because I've got 20 years skills and I have done sex education. And the kids were sort of like, they were getting that from me, but I don't know across all of my colleagues, no disrespect to them, whether A, they would have the enthusiasm or the knowledge or the skill set to be able to do that. So the guidance really is just guidance. It comes with, this is what we want you to do, but it doesn't come with the funding. It doesn't come with the suggested resources. It doesn't come with the lesson strategies or lesson plans. Ofsted, will they come and inspect on that? And I know when I under the last the Labour government, for instance, I was the citizenship and PHSE coordinator then. It was way up the list. It was a priority. It was up there with actually ahead of ICT as practically a core subject. I was inspected as a citizenship coordinator, and PHSE was part of that. And the program for PHSE had to be produced, had to be audited. So if anything, this guidance is needed because they have taken their eye off the ball and allowed a vacuum to happen. Do you think academization has done this, where academies are buying in these resources and saying, here's these resources, and there isn't that oversight? I mean, how has it slipped through the net? Is it a quality assurance in PHSE, the actual issue, not this guidance? Or do we think, was that the way around this, is that we actually have, not just the guidance, but specific produced resources, which gives the teachers the confidence that they're not stepping over the line?
Okay, Laurie, do you want to go first?
I do. Yeah, I think partially academies. I know we've got some like local authorities schools in our area, and obviously I think we do work more closely with them. Academy is obviously a bit more difficult sometimes. I think the problem is, so yes, we need expertise. That's absolutely true, to train teachers. I think the issue has been who those are, and I think kind of schools or head teachers or whoever's in charge in schools have approached this. Like, I don't know, the comparison might be, if you want to do something on Black History Month, there'd be organisations you would go to and they provide you a really neutral resource on there. So it wouldn't be ideological. It would just kind of give you a blow-by-blow account of kind of a Black history, or I don't know, Holocaust Memorial, something like that. And I think that people approach it in a very similar way. So they might do, even like gay rights, when you might have learned that, there were probably 10 years ago, you probably could have gone to Stonewall and got a perfectly sensible history of gay rights. And I think people don't really realise that a lot of these organisations that probably used to be gay rights organisations are actually much more ideological than they were. And obviously some people, teachers, would have quite, if you're tapped into the discussion, would have the skills to go, okay, we'll use that. And I'll give you an example. Like, we did LGBT History Month last year, and the deputy had sent out this thing, and it was saying, oh, the history of gay rights so was kind of started by like black trans women such as Marsha P. Johnson. And I went afterwards and I said, look, this is not actually true. That was a drag queen as a man. He never called himself a trans woman. He wasn't there at the time, all this stuff. And she changed it the following year. But I think you've got to know, not every teacher's going to know that. Like most people will just, oh, well, this has come through, it's reliable, on it goes. That wouldn't even think to check. So yes, expertise, but I do think people need to be a bit diligent about just getting things from groups and just putting it all straight out and thinking that it's neutral. And I think that that's the slight problem, is that people might then think, okay, there are gay people, there are lesbian people, we're fine teaching about that, so let's also teach about genderqueer and non-binary people and all this other stuff in exactly the same way. And I think that's not quite always appropriate because I think that some of it is more contested than just kind of teaching about gay people, teaching about trans people. Yeah.
So it's more than guidance, isn't it? So it is. It's teaching the teachers what to teach, in essence. That, you know, part of our role of being a teacher is constantly learning, isn't it? And society constantly evolves, but we do need the resources. We do need, you know, not just time. We need time. That's the other thing. And we need time in the curriculum. We need time to retrain. We need time to actually then sit down and talk to other members of staff. And again, when you're in a high pressure stakes, exams, and you look at Ofsted and everything else that's going on in schools, where is this in the priorities? And that therein lies the issue, is that it comes out and it generates these headlines because maybe there are some schools who've got it wrong, and it's easy to blame those schools, but not look at the root causes of that blame. It's not that these schools are trying to indoctrinate, and that's what worries me, is these sort of attack lines on education about indoctrination or agendas. And I don't think any schools out there have any sort of agenda for that. The problem is that this guidance comes loaded with that. Do we really disagree? Do we think it comes loaded with that? And unfortunately, because of that, until we have the depoliticization, ironically, depoliticization of education in that sense, unfortunately, the guidance will be tainted by that unless it comes from a source that is, this is, and Gillian can say that this is evidence-based, but then in her speech, she couldn't produce the actual evidence of what's happening. Going, well, okay, this is evidence-based, show us the evidence. But she got found out in other media sort of interviews, and it looked as if she was like somebody saying, oh, yeah. People have reported that, and you're going, come on, we're teachers. We know when somebody's trying to tell us a awfully lie here. Come on. Are you actually telling us that this stuff is happening? And that's the problem. Where are we at? Do we think we need an independent body, not the government, to be doing this? Or is there an independent body that we can trust?
Brent, it did mention a kind of independent panel, but we don't know who. It hasn't mentioned who those people are, or you know what their credentials are. Should we bring in Vix at that point? What do you think on what Brent just said?
Yeah, I also think it's mixed up really with the current state of politics in the country, isn't it? Because in this particular parliament, I think it was Chris Bryant, isn't it? And many others have pointed out how the amount of people with questionable morality, I think, is it 56 MPs currently are under investigation of some kind for sexual assault. We've had 2 have been sent to jail. We've had tractor porn. You know, if you look at the quality of the MPs when it comes to sexual domestic abuse is some of the worst we've seen. And then they will put together all of this guidance telling teachers that they are doing it wrong, that they are corrupting young people. This is a bigger society issue than just having a go at teachers. It feels like, you know, it's another stick to beat the teachers at. The teachers are being ideological, when actually the young people are asking questions, they're having these discussions because of the way in which society is giving these messages to them.
Yep, Laurie?
I don't think it is that ideological. I mean, in their own defense, I mean, I do feel they did go to like an independent panel. I don't think it's saying like, oh, every teacher is. I know there is some commentary, isn't there, on like both sides. Oh yeah, teachers are grooming children and all this stuff, and that's not helpful. I don't think it's helpful to refer to this.
Sorry, Laurie, would it have been better if there's someone independent other than the Secretary of State came out and made this announcement? So someone before the Secretary of State has said, you know, these are our thoughts, and presented that case, and then the Department of Education kind of put the guidance out afterwards? Do you think that would have helped?
I mean, that's probably, maybe they could have managed it a bit better by getting some like head teachers or stuff in the news rather than the secretaries. I mean, I think it's like DFE guidance, so it's not just like, I mean, I don't think Gillian Keegan is that clued up with this. I think originally she was really not getting it at all. I think even in the interviews, she wasn't really well prepared, because I saw that one, they said, what's the evidence? And she wasn't, I don't think she's particularly well briefed on this. I think people in the department are getting it. I think kind of some civil servants or the expert panel have kind of realised there's an issue here. But no, Vix, you and I agree. I don't think Gillian Keegan really is on top of her brief. I think we can agree with that. But I don't think. Of
course, Gillian is not here to defend herself, so I will stick up for Gillian. She's doing a pretty good, it's forward job.
But I think on both sides, I think people shouldn't just. Obviously, I don't support the Conservatives on most stuff, but it doesn't mean that anything they produce I immediately write off as like cultural or whatever, because I think in this case there is some like important stuff in there, and I think it's a bit unfair to say, oh, it's. I mean, teachers can still have conversations and you can still have discussions, but I just think there's something very different between saying, okay, it's like, if some kid was saying, oh, what's like Sam Smith, so he's a non-binary. I think if a teacher was saying, oh yeah, well, some people are not male or female and they're not men or women and they're actually non-binary and they're different, I think that probably goes a bit beyond. I think maybe you might say to that, oh, what do you think that means? Why do you think that Sam Smith says that? So a discussion about it, and maybe like, I think is acceptable. I think taking the kind of like going beyond that and saying, no, Sam Smith is not a man, he's not a woman, he's this other category, and that's different. I think that's kind of bringing in some ideology. But yeah, I mean, if a kid wants to come to a lesson and talk about, or even in the playground, I mean, you hear them talking about the identities and stuff, in some schools, not others. I don't think the teacher will go over to that group and say, shh, you can't talk about identities. They can, but it's just that, how do you respond to that? You want to open it up and talk about where that's coming from, not kind of yes. I think that's kind of where the
thing is, one of our strengths as a teacher is relationships, and relationships built on trust, especially if you're doing things like sex education, which you're a tutor, and they are, you know, in my setting, the tutor is the person who stays with the children 5 years. You build up that level of trust, so kids will, you know, divulge, and that's sometimes where we have to do safeguarding, because, you know, we've got spidey senses. Of course, we've got spidey man senses, because we can sense some things are wrong with some families. And we saw during COVID, for instance, an upsurge in obviously violence against children and all the negative effects of obviously what happened in lockdown with children away from schools. And again, you got the government saying how important it was to get kids back in schools, and it's taken them basically what 3 years now to produce guidelines. If it's that important, really, it should come with more than just these guidelines. It should have come with more resources. It should come with a higher priority, rather than a government minister basically saying, we've done this, tick a box. The question we have is unfortunately, our children are in a society where they will ask these questions, and we as teachers, because it's part of our job, will answer them. My worry is, of course, is the gotcha moment, that there are people out there now who are just now waiting for a teacher to say something. And you said it earlier on about the recording devices, who are setting teachers up and saying that's against the guidelines. And we're seeing a lot more spurious complaints. As I can tell you, as a union representative, I am literally swamped now with spurious complaints, the gotcha moments. You can't do this, you can't do that. And unfortunately, now schools and teachers are self-censoring. And that's something one of the stories we featured, didn't we, Adam, that, you know, a lot of teachers now are not engaging in some of the issues because it's contested. And that leads to a confidence issue of what is contested. And therein lies the power vacuum. Then, some teachers will play it that safe that they will not be delivering anything of value whatsoever, just in case they come a cropper, and just in case they get into trouble, just in case they get it wrong. And that's what worries me about all of this, is just that optics of, we are now being sort of censored a little bit. And I know we're not, but it's that kind of, what we call ethos that's happening, eating away at us, where we don't now have that safety to be able to express ourselves in the classroom and or have our judgment questioned, because that is the problem, is that my professional judgment can be questioned now, because if I go against the guidance, and it's easy saying that, Laurie, you're like, oh yeah, no teacher's going to do that. But I know my colleagues who don't have the confidence or moxie of me to say that's guidelines. They will literally not do that now. So how do we do the guidance, but at the same time give teachers the confidence that they're not going to get you the gotchas, that somebody's not going to inform inform the people in charge and go straight to the local press and say, oh, you've done this, you've done that, and before you know it, they're in the right-wing press and they're splashed in there's Wookie McLeff teacher off doing that thing again, because that's where we're at with this. So how do we stop that, staying within that guidance and still service the children, get into that sweet spot, that porridge, the right porridge, the right temperature of the porridge? How do we get to that through this guidance?
Go on, Laurie first. Yeah.
Oh, do you want me first?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
I think it's very difficult, and I think possibly what might worry some teachers is topics that you can't talk about still in society in some circles, because like any discussion is bigotry or something like this. So they kind of map those. So if I can't talk about this I can't talk about gender with my friends down the pub, whatever, I never say that. Like we can't talk about that. So they might think that applies to schools. Oh, I can't talk about this. And I think you may get some kids of a certain year that even to I mean, maybe this is more early university than it is possibly A-level, who are brought up in an online environment where even to question what is a gender is any discussion is viewed as like bigotry or transphobia. Like even the philosophical discussion, like what is a gender identity, what does non-binary mean, there is some online environments where to say that is just hate and akin to like racism and stuff. So I don't know, I'm keen to hear your views. It could be that there are some teachers who are mapping that online environment and kind of real word not being able to talk about this and thinking I can't talk about this in the classroom, just in case you have one of those kind of like a kid in there who has been brought up to almost with a kind of safetyist mentality that to question anyone's identity is the same as hatred. And I do think you get some of these kind of organizations that promote that view that to question the concept of gender identity is hate. And so you're getting kids that are kind of believing that, and then the teachers kind of don't want to, like, are self-censoring for that reason. I don't know. I'm keen to hear your views. I wonder if that's part of it. In some instances.
If I just rephrase the question, then because this is guidance that's coming out, so it's meant to, ironically, I mean, we have this debate, support and guide. Do you think, Vix, it then potentially has the opposite effect, and actually puts people off talking about it?
I agree, because I think it goes down to the word teaches, doesn't it? You know, like when somebody says they are teaching gender, they are teaching, the act of sex. What is that? Because some people are going to picture that we've literally got a PowerPoint with a picture of a clitoris in front of everybody at the age of 6, right? Or exactly like you were saying, Laurie, about actually a teacher having the confidence to facilitate a discussion. Yeah. And those difficult discussions, those discussions that are very difficult to have in an online environment, either because you're in separate bubbles, or if your bubbles collide, it turns into some horrendous cancel culture event. Where actually, if you are a confident, experienced, supported teacher, you should be able to facilitate discussion and be able to include everybody in that discussion with an end goal of enlightenment with a lot of these issues, and do it at an age appropriate level. So I think the idea of when it is released to the media saying teaching of contraception, that can be done at so many different levels. So the implication, the way in which the member of the public is perceiving that and the actual reality, we know as teachers, are very, very different, but they don't necessarily know that. So I think, and it's not just sex education, that it's, as any humanities teacher, if you're discussing any of those, important historical, geographical, and religious areas. There will always be those very difficult conversations, those gotcha moments. But you can do that through facilitating discussion from the young people and using appropriate resources. But it does take a level of experience and confidence, doesn't it? And we're losing those teachers.
This is why I like teaching maths, Vix, because there's we're just Pythagoras and true-or-false. I don't have to worry about any of that. It's just, this is it. But no, I take the point, yeah.
What you're really saying, Laurie, is you like the binary.
Yeah. I like the binary thing, yeah. It's either right or wrong, exactly. Yeah.
You got me. I often say that there's no right or wrong in history. It's just interpretation and opinion, and there is that. But it's true. That's what we do. We have got left brain children. We've got right brain children. One of the amazing things about education is the diversity of the young people that we have, and we have to be, servicing so many more needs now, haven't we? And that's the thing, is that guidance is there. And I think you've got a point, Laurie. I think it's true. Guidance is guidance, isn't it? It's having that confidence. And you're right as well, Vix. We need people with the confidence to go, this is the guidance, but you know what? This is my setting. This is my school. This is how I'm going to do this. And I'll stay within the guidance, but you know what? This is what fits with us. And that's knowing your school and having staff stay long enough in a school and having the experience of that school and that school community helps with that. When you've got so many people chopping and changing and leaving schools so quickly and not putting down roots in communities, it's very hard to do that. To know what sex education would work in one community doesn't always, work with a different cohort in a different setting in a different sort of socioeconomic group as well. It's that pitch, isn't it? What is, and equally what parents will, because you've got to talk to parents, you've got to negotiate with parents, you've got to work with parents. What are they comfortable with as well? Because some parents would have a different interpretation. Yourself, different postcodes will have a vastly different interpretation of that. So, but this has been actually quite pleasant to talk about this issue, and actually people not literally, at loggerheads is quite refreshing on it. So I'd say thank you to both of you for conducting this actually in a very pleasant, evidence-based, and also we've got difference of opinion, and I think that's been very, very well done, guys. So good luck to prospective elections, and I'm sure we'll be in touch again. And good luck with the guidance.
Thank you very much. It was really good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the guest there. It was really important, really kind of calm and nice debate, kind of getting through some of the big issues.
Hello to John.
Well, I'll just hello to John. Hello, John. We do kind of proper catchphrase, don't we, for John? But as you can see, a QR code on your screen there. Just tell you that this show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt, educational publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Don't miss out. Level up your professional development today and visit johncattbookshop.com to explore the full range of titles. Use the code JCTTR2425 for 20% off your order. Happy reading. But if we've got two sponsors today, so the next one is with Reading Solutions UK. I feel happy.
Hold on a second. You read the Reading Solutions, so I think you need the Reading Solutions, my friend. So there we go.
Easy. Okay. Long day reading, lots of assignments. I think I calculated today. Oh, I'll come back to the advert in a minute, but each assignment was 16,000 words, and I'm on number 32. So my eyes are in another place at the minute. But Reading Solutions UK are looking for best practices and innovative strategies to foster confident, lifelong readers. Join the free online International Reading Conference on the 11th and 12th and 13th of June. Hear from speakers like TV personality and education experts, Basit Sadiki, which I believe is the guy from Derby, isn't he? He was on Gogglebox. I think I've met him a few times.
Yeah, he was. And of course, I love Michael Rosen.
Oh yeah, and also beloved, as it says here, national treasure, Michael Rosen, and the National Literacy Trust's Irene Picton as well. Through the 3-day conference, speakers will explore a range of topics at the forefront of current educational landscape, with sessions relevant for all educators and key stages. So please visit Reading Solutions at readingsolutionsuk.com to grab your free ticket, and I'll practice my reading for next week, but to get that through. I don't think we've got time actually to do this, but we do want to kind of have a look at the main parties, but I'm sure that will come through. I think kind of one of the things to takeaways of all what we talked about tonight was actually the need for that consistent, highly qualified RSE teachers in our schools, and part of this, maybe part of this kind of issue, if you want to kind of raise the guidance is needed, is because there is that revolving door sometimes in some of our schools, and therefore it's difficult to kind of get that kind of consistent, well-trained staff to kind of deliver these very complicated issues that we want our children to learn from.
And that's the thing. I adopt the same principle to staff that I have to pupils. Are they doing it wrong because they don't know how to do it right? When somebody turns around and criticizes my lesson, I'm going, right, come on, show me. So
what's practice? What's best practice here? That's what we want to know.
Show me how I'm doing it wrong. Any sports coach, any coach, martial arts coach, right? Show me how to throw somebody over my shoulder in judo. Simple as that. Same as teaching. If we're this culture of they're doing it wrong in schools, I stick behind it. I don't believe that people deliberately have agendas. Seriously, that they're going into schools to sort of secretly sort of convert people. I mean, come on, that's just ridiculous. Not fear mongering. I don't like that culture, that idea.
If that is happening, there is already kind of guidance with that, with safeguarding, isn't there?
Exactly that, because systems have never been as rigorous as in schools. They have to be. School. I'll be honest with you, and I think Vic's alluded to that. Schools have higher standards in Parliament when it comes to when you look at the conduct of staff, you look at the professionality of staff, you look at how we dress, how we act. And without a shadow of a doubt, we're still a profession, and rightly so, and we need to be, because we work with young people, and therefore we do have to get it right. So I do agree in principle with having guidance on things like this, because we are working with young people, and they are sacred. They are the most important thing in this country, the future. And that leads me to the question of, when we come to the general election, as an educator, how high up will education be on the roster of important items? Will it be, like 1997, when it was massively, was it one of the top three issues? There was the three-part phrase, education, education, education. Yeah. It was interesting. That brought it back the other day when I heard Rishi Sunak's announcement, and in the background was the Reams Labour sort of 1997 sort of raison d'etre, the kind of and he was actually an Irishman as well, Hannah from and Brian Cox. It's interesting. Brian Cox was the keyboard player on that song, and I saw Brian Cox actually do his sort of like retweet of that and going, yeah, here's a better version. So we had seen education higher up the sort of agenda and the lists, but I'd be interested when voters, and this is my take, and I'll leave it with this. If people want the education system they're going to get, then they need to prioritize, look at their candidates, look at the political parties, and say to themselves, what kind of education system do I want for children? There's 9 million children in this country, and they've got equivalent of maybe two parents and grandparents and everything else. And if you add all that family around a child, and you add up the impact of schools, it's well over half the country.
Yeah,
that's massive impact on society to get wrong, and a national efficiency. When one of the things about the Industrial Revolution was that this country, brought in education because it wanted people to be able to work. Unintelligent people can't work complex machinery. The more complex the machines got, the more complex people had to be, and the more educated we needed to be. Well, apply the same logic to post-industrial revolution society and artificial intelligence. If we want our children to be able to compete in the post-industrial world, there's no greater. I mean, Rishi Sunak said it himself, didn't he? He said no greater silver bullet than an education. So I'm curious. I really am curious to see in the sort of messaging, or are we going to get the greatest hits of certain sort of elections of the past, the taxes and migration and things like that? NHS obviously be up there, and the economy. Where will education come out in the ether? And I know those of us involved in education will always want to see it higher up the list. But if it's not higher up the list, that would be a bit disheartening, wouldn't it? That'd be a little bit disheartening for us. So that's how I feel about that. Anywho. That's the most unawkward silence we've ever had between us. Are we calling good night on the hour? Literally on.
Try and get the hour, but yeah, it's been a great chat. Thanks to Vix and Laurie, and thanks for Brent as well, or your thoughts tonight. Thanks to our sponsors, and yeah,
thanks to Tom in the background.
Thanks to Tom in the background, and many thanks to Tom HB as well, if you're listening. Thank you for your support over the last couple of months. Getting Education Tonight off the ground. We really appreciate your messages and thoughts and comments, as we've gone on. But thank you very much for all the have a good evening and have a good half term if you're on half term next week. All the best. Good night.
Full of outstanding and world